Okay, we'll just have a look at this block in. It's a subject with a few hay bales. Normally with composition, a good trick is to look for some big shapes. There's a little shape on there. So just grabbing a little bit of my archival lean medium. Actually, let's just throw a tiny little bit of yellow ochre into that. So I'm looking for the big shapes, but also I want these big shapes to tie my composition together. So with this scene, there's a few shapes that are kind of almost like islands, so they're floating a little bit. So I do wish and need to join those shapes up together. So I'll be using directional lines, like a little directional line off there. So the trick is to look in the scene for little elements or lines or objects that we can use to our advantage, not because they're there, but because we can use them to enhance our composition. So there's a big area of sort of long grass there for some reason, but what I wanted to use it was to help tie this main shape here in with that mid distance. So just take what we need, don't take what we think we need, or the classic one is because it's there. That's possibly the worst reason why we should take something and then put it into our painting. So there's a couple of different ways to compose a scene or to block in a subject. It's just slightly looking uphill. Maybe come up just a little higher. And the beauty of this, my approach with this, is that I'm just putting the paint on nice and thin. So if I do have something in the wrong spot, I can very easily remove it, alter it, bring it into a different area. Okay, let's start to look for these background row of trees. What I do like is this nice dark value over in here of this row of trees. And so for me, once I've got the big shapes in place, the next most important thing is to look at some of these values. So I'm just sort of putting in some, these are more like value notes. There's plenty of blue in that, even though there is a little bit of cad yellow. But the reason why this is important, because it starts to give me an idea. See, I've got a little bit of yellow ochre on there, a little bit of the shadow going in there. We can start to bring in this big shadow in here. And there's a lot more of this foliage dropping down, but we only need one little bit. If I continue it on, it's just going to be too much. So I'll bring it in around about that 2/3, 1/3, and down about 1/3 if need be, but that's normally it, about all I need. Okay, let's bring in a bigger brush now. So that's more just some skeleton shapes, then added with some tonal notes. So what we need now is a really good dark. Got to push these dark values. Possibly one of the darkest darks is the shape in between these two hay bales. So even if I exaggerate a little bit and go a little too strong, that's not a bad thing with oil paint, because quite easy we can just knock it back. If it's not dark enough, we're in a little bit of strife, because we'll always be fighting grade down values. It truly is one of the keys, is to not introduce too much white or any white at all, or those lighter values in the early stages. It will only compromise the quality of our values. just throwing in a little bit of cad orange, even though it's a big heavy shadow, but I'm trying to make it as light and get as much depth in there as possible. So this is the end of the hay bales. Sometimes it's actually hard to see the actual value when it is so dark in here. But we'll just go with the general yellowy ochre, cad orange, making sure we ensure we have that little bit of local colour in there as well, and those edges are accurate. So this is kind of like the push-pull, where we're just generalising, to be brutally honest, at this stage. So now, if that's starting to tie that focal point, or it'll be this edge up here will be kind of very crucial. So now let's bring some of these big shapes in here. Of these little distant shapes, I should point out. It's pretty well got the basis for it. So let's come into this background. So lots of ultra blue. Just might have had a touch too much red in that. Even a little bit too much of the alizarin can sort of want to push forward. So we're all the time using our values. Our lights and our darks, warms and colds. Always try and remember, I'm not trying to think what colour is that. It's always how dark, how light, how warm, how cold. That doesn't really matter what medium you work in. That theory holds true right across the whole spectrum of art, really. So let's start to bring, there are some shapes in through there, but I think it's going to be a distraction, so we can leave those babies out. Okay, now let's blast this midground distance in. This is an area that I like to over-colorize. I've learnt that if you underdo this, you can leave yourself a little susceptible to your sunlit areas appearing a little flat and cold. So you'll notice that that's almost 90% cad yellow with a little bit of phthalo and white, just a tiny little bit of white. And don't be afraid to paint up to those shapes. The worst thing I can do is stop right at the edge. It'll look like a tapestry or a cardboard cut out of collage is the danger with doing it that way. So let's start to bring in some of these, just find this horizon line. Remember, it's still just generalization. So even not worrying too much about where those shapes are. It's really just placing warm values that can be cooled down later. And see, we will bring a little bit of light in through there as well. When we get to that stage, let's just check where that finishes. And just for those grassed areas, let's bring in a little bit of cadmium red for those. That's the one. And there's another one in behind here, which will actually has a dual benefit of actually tying these hay bales together, but also actually you can see it helps interrupt the horizon line. With landscape painting, the last thing we want is a really strong horizon line, or too strong I should say, or it can just run the eye from left to right a little too quickly. So it's all about the speed that the eye wants to travel. So I'll actually paint through some of those. I can always restate them. Really just need to get the this area on. So it's a fair bit of ultra blue and a little bit of alizarin, a little bit of the yellow ochre or cad yellow, whatever's left in the brush. And have a look at this great little trick. I've put the whole shape on in one go, but instead of thinking, oh, you know what, I don't know where that light's going to go, just wipe him back. It's one of the great little assets of oil painting. And we're always looking at sort of pushing our medium and getting the most out of it. So now the good trick is just to slow down, just get these edges on this building. Because if we don't get the design right, or not right, but close enough, it'll start to look out of perspective. And so that's got the basis for it. I do like to leave my skies till much later. I'm not a big fan of putting them in too early these days. It's been a bit of a change in my approach in probably the last 7 or 8 years, but I think it is for the best. The main reason being that if I go start putting a heap of paint up here, I can lose the tonal key of the painting. And this is another little gadget that I've actually enjoyed using. It's just looks like a little rubber on the end of a pencil or a pen, but what it actually is just like a little squeegee, a little rubber. And what it can do is can help me draw these shapes back in here. Let me just bring that back over. And we've got another one in there. So this is just, it's almost like an eraser, but so instead of putting paint on, we're actually taking it off. Okay, so I'll get into this foliage coming down through here, because it is, even though it's fairly dark, but it is the closest one to us. So and another good trick with this is to block the eye from wanting to disappear out that top left-hand side. I want the eye to come into the foreground, mid-distance, and then back to the little building in the background. So that's pretty close to what we need. Let me just yep, that's down. Just want to go, even though it's actually a grey, silvery grey roof, I'm actually going to adjust that to keep the interest going. And then it's sort of a, looks like it's almost like two buildings in one, but I will join it up as if it's one major building. And we are down a little lower looking up to it. Okay, the other little important thing is just to find where that the centre of that is. So there will be some colour changes and value changes in here, because I won't want to leave all that same value all the way through, but that's pretty close to a block in. Hopefully you can get them done in around about anything from 8 minutes to 15 minutes, depending on the complexity of the scene. But that's given me enough information to continue with. Okay, we've got the finished painting here. Thought I'd just go over a few of the little aspects of it. Thankfully it was one of those paintings that came out pretty much how I hoped would. So, and sometimes actually I'll push a painting to about this stage And then it's all about just having a bit of a break from it, actually, and then being able to see, oh, you know what, I can actually strengthen or weaken this area, or work on improving some of the drawing aspects. There's always little shapes that just need a little more finessing. So there's, and if anything, I just have to watch that I haven't overworked that foreground, that shadow. Sometimes it's a temptation to put too much in, but overall I think I achieved linking the foreground focal points of the big hay bale there. I've tied it in with the shadow, got this small little directional line which leads into the mid-distance, and then that's joined up with a small little bit of highlight there, back in with our distant focal point, and notice how all these lines are all pushing towards our focal point as well in the background. So I'd feel as if that's a fairly satisfactory day's work. When it comes to art, there is no single right or wrong answer. However, there are still a lot of concepts and techniques that students need to learn to create a strong visual language. This course is designed to help you develop and find your own visual language so that you can start expressing yourself more confidently, because over the years I've studied and noted the areas where students tend to struggle the most, and then I've delved deeply into these topics. So we will cover the basics of colour, edge, how to achieve a strong contrast from light to dark, focal points, and creating depth so that you can start to use it effectively in your work. I'll demonstrate a wide range of subjects which I believe will broaden your horizons and allow you to gain experiences that you may have only dreamed of trying. By the end of this course, you'll have a better understanding of how to express your own visual language and create artwork that is both successful and expressive. I invite you to join me for an exciting year of learning and exploration.